Look, I thought I would begin just with some recollection of my very early time with the Ecumenical Council, which began in 1986. And about 6 months after I started, I attended my first general meeting of what was then the Australian Council of Churches. And on that occasion, the Australian Council of Churches was celebrating the 40th anniversary of an ecumenical body in Australia. And it was a great privilege to be present for that occasion with so many past and present Australian leaders of the ecumenical movement, and to experience the many splendid things about the meeting generally. The worship, which was an expression of the different traditions represented in the Australian Council of Churches, and that in itself was an enriching and uniting experience. But also the diverse issues that were covered in that meeting. Report from the Faith and Order Commission about the Australian churches responding to the document Baptism, Eucharist and Ministry, which at that time was a fairly new consensus document from the World Council of Churches on those three church dividing issues, baptism, Eucharist and ministry. Then there was a report about a mission and evangelism program. There was the Commission for World Christian Action report on its partnership with church aid and development programs in many parts of the world. There was a presentation by the Commission on the Status of Women, especially in audio-visual on domestic violence. All of these things being covered, and this was 1986. There were very significant examples of the Australian Council of Churches being an agent for ecumenism in its broadest sense. And the experience of the Australian Council of Churches meeting helped me to see the breadth of the ecumenical vision as a vision that challenges us to work together for the unity and renewal of the church. Certainly that, but also for the unity and renewal of the whole human community and the entire earth. And defined by that broad vision, ecumenism confronts whatever works against unity and wholeness in every situation. Fundamentally, it is an attitude toward everything we do. It is a way of doing. It is a way of being Christian people engaged in the ministry of Christ. And so ecumenism confronts us at the points of division within and between the churches. The existence of those divisions ensures that the church fails to be an authentic sign of God's purposes of unity and wholeness. And it also confronts us at the points of division in our world, and it calls the church to be an effective instrument of God's Spirit in seeking wholeness, peace through justice in God's world. The word ecumenism or ecumenical come from the Greek word oikumene, meaning the whole inhabited world, which itself comes from the word oikos, meaning house or household. In other words, it's a very inclusive word of human community. So the ecumenical vision for today recognizes the world as God's creation and the church as God's creation, where the part played by the church is to be open to the transformation that Christ brings, and at the same time to transform and serve the world. It has been said that ecumenism is anything that relates to the whole task of the whole church to bring the whole gospel to the whole world. And that's the broad vision that inspires the entire ecumenical endeavour. But more specifically, ecumenism, as the word is commonly used today, refers to a movement of churches and Christians with the goal of the visible unity of the church. And it touches all dimensions of church life, including common worship, mission, service, and renewal. The modern ecumenical movement is a response to the question, how can the church preach the gospel of reconciliation with authenticity while it is fractured by unreconciled divisions? the quest for unity is always grounded in mission. And it makes sense, therefore, that this movement, known as the ecumenical movement, is generally understood to have begun in the Western Church with the International Missionary Conference in Edinburgh in 1910. So it has its foundation in mission. But its origins can be traced back into the latter part of the 19th century, when some Christians in Western Europe and Britain were coming together in educational contexts, such as the Sunday School movement, the Young Men's Christian Association, the Young Women's Christian Association, and the Student Christian movement. And out of those experiences, the modern ecumenical movement became a movement grounded in the conviction that God's mission in the world, of which the church is an instrument, is a mission of reconciliation and unity, and that division is a denial of the unity Christians have in Christ, and therefore is a hindrance to mission. And to act on that conviction, from the Edinburgh Conference, Missionary Conference in 1910, there developed three streams of activity: a mission stream, a justice theme, and a theology theme. The International Missionary Council was formed in 1921, bringing together for study and common action the foreign missionary societies and national Christian councils that existed at that time. In Australia, for example, there was the National Missionary Council formed in 1926, and it became associated with the International Missionary Council. In the justice stream, the first Life and Work Conference was held in Stockholm in 1925, and so we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that first Life and Work Conference. And its purpose was to address the practical problem of applying Christian principles to the society and to international relations, exploring the responsibility of Christians for great social concerns of equity and peace and justice. There was the conviction that while Christians were divided by doctrine, they could be united in service to the world. Doctrine divides, service unites was the slogan of the time. But nevertheless, doctrine had to be addressed. The divisive issues of doctrine were taken up, and this became the theology stream. The first Faith and Order, or theological conference, was held in Lausanne in 1927, where it was immediately recognized that in the quest for Christian unity, agreement was needed on baptism, Eucharist, ministry, and understanding the nature of the church. So that conference in Lausanne in 1927 really set the theological agenda for the ecumenical movement that has been pursued now for almost 100 years. So those three streams of engagement began in the 1920s and continued to flourish through international conferences. And then in 1948, two of those streams, the Life and Work stream, the Justice stream, and the Faith and Order, the theological stream, came together to form the World Council of Churches, the WCC, in 1948. And they were later joined by the third stream, the missionary stream, the International Missionary Council, in 1961, so that the World Council of Churches became a representative body of those three streams of activity. At its beginning, the World Council of Churches had 147 member churches, Anglican, Orthodox, and Protestant. A few were from Australia and New Zealand, but the great majority, of course, were from Western Europe and North America. But in the almost 8 decades since then, the original number of member churches has grown from 147 to 352, so that all the main mainline churches are represented: the Assyrian Church of the East and Oriental Orthodox churches, the Eastern Orthodox churches, the Anglican Communion, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, and other Reformed churches, United and Uniting churches, some Old Catholic churches, some other independent Baptist and Pentecostal churches, all represented in that membership of 352 churches that make up the World Council of Churches currently. And no longer, of course, is the majority from Europe and North America. The member churches from other regions have greatly increased, from Africa, Asia, the Middle East, the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Pacific. The current WCC member churches from Aotearoa, New Zealand are the Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian churches and the Christian Church of New Zealand. The formation of the WCC in 1948 was 10 years in the making. Many things happened in anticipation. In Australia, for example, that anticipation took the form of national ecumenical committees and state committees being formed in 1946, 2 years ahead of the formation of the World Council. However, if a world war had not prevented it, the World Council was intended to be established in 1941. And in that year, churches in New Zealand were really on board, with an ecumenical body being formed in 1941, as early as that. The formation of ecumenical councils was repeated in countries around the world, in local areas, within countries, and in different regions of the world, such as the Pacific, Asia, Europe, and Africa. The quest for unity also found expression in the formation of united churches. For example, the United Church in Canada as early as 1925, the Church of South India in 1947, the Church of North India in 1961, the United Reformed Church in the United Kingdom in 1972, and then finally the Uniting Church in Australia in 1977. Back on the international scene, it must also be noted that the World Council has a strong working relationship with the Roman Catholic Church, made possible by another event of extraordinary significance that occurred in the 1960s, the Second Vatican Council, and in particular, the Vatican Council's decree on Ecumenism in 1964. That was transformational. It opened the Roman Catholic Church to formal participation in the ecumenical movement in many ways. The official relationship with the World Council began in 1965, when a joint working group was formed, consisting of an equal number of members appointed by the Vatican and by the World Council. And it has been reappointed after every World Council of Churches assembly, and this year marks the 60th anniversary of its formation. The work of the joint working group is recognised as one of the ecumenical legacies of improved relations among churches growing from the Second Vatican Council. Since 1968, the resources for the annual observance of the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity have been jointly prepared by the World Council of Churches Faith and Order Commission and the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. And though never becoming a full member of the World Council, the Roman Catholic Church has become a member of two World Council commissions, the Faith and Order Commission as early as 1968, and the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism in 2005. The first assembly of the World Council, when it was formed, was in Amsterdam in 1948. Since then, there have been 10 assemblies. The seventh was in Canberra in 1991. And that certainly was a high point in the ecumenical experience of Australian churches. But over the years, the theological work done through multilateral dialogue within the World Council has culminated in the production of two extremely significant convergence documents, the Baptism, Eucharist and Ministry in 1982, and the Church Towards a Common Vision in 2013. those theological documents are the product of the agenda that was set by the first Faith and Order Conference in 1927. The World Council has also given expression to the prophetic voice of the churches speaking together in many important ways, such as its program to combat racism and the World Council's work on a sustainable society and environmental integrity. Since its 10th assembly in Busan in South Korea in 2013, and then again from its most recent assembly in Karlsruhe in Germany just 3 years ago, the World Council has continued to invite the churches to be on a pilgrimage of justice and peace, working together to implement the signs of the kingdom in the world. Now, all those structures at the international level, but national level in your country, in New Zealand, the National Council of Churches was established, as I said, in 1941, and was an associated council with the World Council in formation, and then with the World Council itself after 1948. When formed, the National Council of Churches New Zealand brought churches together for practical cooperation and for deepening understanding and fellowship with each other. And that council also produced a very significant ecumenist for the world stage. In 1947, Alan Brash, an ordained minister of the Presbyterian Church, became the General Secretary of the National Council of Churches New Zealand, in which role he served until 1964. He then went to work for the East Asian Christian Conference based in Singapore. From there, he went to London and became the Director of Christian Aid. And in 1970, he went to Geneva to the World Council's Interchurch Aid, Refugee and World Service. In him, very early, New Zealand produced a person of great zeal for the ecumenical movement. But that National Council of Churches in New Zealand was dissolved in 1989 and was succeeded by the Conference of Churches in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with the Roman Catholic Church in membership, for the first time. However, it too was dissolved in 2005, leaving New Zealand without a national ecumenical body. Then in 2013, as I said, our Centre for Ecumenical Studies, working with the Reverend Prince Devanandan, ran a week intensive course on ecumenism in Auckland. And it seems to have been a catalyst for conversations that led to the establishment of the National Dialogue for Christian Unity in 2014, with the Anglican, Methodist, and Roman Catholic churches as the initial participants, joined subsequently by the Presbyterian Church and the Religious Society of Friends, so that once again, New Zealand has a national instrument for the ecumenical endeavour. Before I worked for the New South Wales Ecumenical Council, I was the Anglican rector or parish priest. It was in a small town called Morpeth. It's in the lower Hunter Valley, about 150, 160 kilometres north of Sydney. In that town, the Anglican Church is at one end of the town, the Roman Catholic Church is at the other. It's an unmistakable sign of the way the town was settled in the mid-19th century. One lot at one end, the other lot at the other end. It was symptomatic of the suspicion, the tension, and hostility that existed between Christians of different denominations at that time. But now, because of the ecumenical movement of the 20th century, those sectarian religious conflicts that dogged Western Christianity for half a millennium seem to be a thing of the past, and also a much closer relationship of understanding, friendship, and cooperation has developed. Yet here in the 21st century, we find ourselves in a strange place. The great achievements of the modern ecumenical movement, especially the amazing consensus or convergences reached through dialogue, brought the participating churches a great distance along the ecumenical journey. But the promised land of unity has not been reached. Further progress has not been made. It appears too difficult. If anything, many churches seem to be specializing in fragmentation and exacerbating their differences, especially in arguments over gender, sexuality, and other issues of personal morality. At the same time, the Western culture of individualism and personal preference sees people go off to start their own church almost too often to keep count. The one body of Christ has become more and more fractured. It all seems to mock the prayer of Jesus that they may be one. And that brings us to the deepest motive that still must drive the ecumenical movement. Unity is not just a pragmatic thing. Ecumenism is not an appendix, a nice but non-essential thing that gets added to the church's mission, something to which we give some attention when we have some spare time. Rather, ecumenism belongs to the nature of the church. It is of the essence of the church. And we can think about it in parallel with thinking about the Eucharist. The Eucharist has been foundational to the church's identity from the beginning. So too, from its beginning, unity that makes for authentic mission has been intrinsic to the church's identity. The first is true, arising out of obedience to the command of Christ. The Eucharist celebrated in response to the command, "Do this," draws us into relationship in faith, love, and hope with the one who commands that this be done in memory of him. However, while that command of Christ is found in the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, it is not found in the fourth Gospel. This does not mean the author plays down the significance of the Eucharist, as chapter 6 of the fourth Gospel makes radically clear. But what happens in the Gospel of John's account of the Last Supper is that there is a different action, a feet washing, and there is another imperative, the new commandment, love one another. Both the action and the accompanying command put the focus on the quality of the community, and this community building theme reaches its climax in the prayer of Jesus then in chapter 17, the prayer for their unity in love and truth, that the world might believe. So the synoptic and Pauline accounts of the Last Supper give us the command, "Do this," making the Eucharist foundational in the Church's life. On the other hand, the Johannine account of the Last Supper gives us the new command, "Love one another," and gives us the prayer of Jesus that they may be one, making love and unity intrinsic to the Church's identity from the beginning. That is who we are. To realize that love and unity more fully in the life of the Church is the ecumenical imperative. Deep down, we know that visible unity is Christ's will for his people, and that division itself is a scandal. That is why we know that the Last Supper imperative, "Love one another," and the Last Supper prayer, "that they may be one," make love and unity intrinsic to the Church's identity. That is why we know that the ecumenical task is crucial to who we are as Church, the body of Christ. This is why it's not enough just to accept the great diversity of churches and have them settled in good relationships and just leave it at that. By and large, this is the point we have reached now in the ecumenical journey, but it is a weak understanding of the nature of unity. The reality is that while there have been wonderful signs of the ecumenical journey continuing overall, ecumenism occupies a lesser place in the life of the churches now. There is no longer the same commitment to strive for the visible unity of the body of Christ that gave rise to the ecumenical movement throughout most of the 20th century. It now seems true to say that to be ecumenical, to be guided by the vision of the oikumene, is to be counter to the prevailing mindset within much of the church and in the wider society. Ecumenism dreams of an alternative reality. I said earlier that the 20th century saw the formation of several united churches which brought together 2, 3 or more churches into one ecclesial structure. The Uniting Church in Australia is one example. Many expected that such unions would keep on happening and would become more inclusive, and that this would be the path to the visible unity of the church. But that did not happen. And so people began to think of visible unity as the churches recognizing in each other the marks of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church of Christ. And this has its basis in the New Testament. There, the word ecclesia, meaning assembly, or translated church, refers both to the local congregation and to the church universal, with the sense that each congregation is the expression in that particular place and time of the one church of Jesus Christ. Can we apply that New Testament concept to the ecumenical goal of the visible unity of the church? To do so means that unity consists in us recognizing in each other, in our various churches, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That is the idea put forward in statements on unity endorsed by World Council of Churches assemblies, especially in Canberra in 1991, and restated at subsequent assemblies in Porto Alegre in 2006, Busan in 2013, and in Karlsruhe in 2022. They all have expressed the vision of the World Council for the visible unity of all Christians. The model of the unity we seek, affirmed in those statements, is that visible unity consists in us recognizing in each other the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and so sharing a common sacramental life, entered by one baptism, celebrating one Eucharist, sharing a common life, recognizing one another's ministries, and engaging in common witness and service, all held together by conciliar forms of cooperation. That really would be the church witnessing to an alternative reality. However, if such an alternative is ever to be realized, a profound change in attitude would be required. A change that would be grounded in 2 principles, an ecumenical principle and a theological principle. The ecumenical principle is about the nature of unity. The unity the churches seek, it has never been thought of as uniformity, with all worshipping the same way and expressing faith in the same way. The ecumenical principle is unity in diversity, reflecting God's complex unity as Trinity and the various complexity of God's creation. Christian unity, to be Catholic, must be able to include human diversity in all its racial, cultural, theological, and liturgical richness. Indeed, the great threat to the unity and Catholicity of the Church is not diversity, but uniformity. The New Testament images of the Church are mostly images of a complex unity, a unity in diversity, like a body, a building, a vine, a flock. The Vatican II decree on ecumenism says, while preserving unity is essential, let everyone in the Church preserve a proper freedom in the various forms of spiritual life and discipline, in the variety of liturgical rites, and even in the theological elaborations of revealed truth. In all things, it said, let charity prevail. The unity we seek is a unity in diversity, for diversity is essential to wholeness. That's the ecumenical principle. The theological principle has to do with the nature of God, expanding our image of God as incomprehensible holy mystery. Such an image says two things. First, God is beyond all our explanations and projects. And second, all our human claims to truth are partial at best. Frequently in the scriptures, there is the question, to what will you liken me? I am God and there is no other. Isaiah 46. And the divine affirmation, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. Isaiah 55. This is about the utter otherness, the mystery of God. It says all our language, our metaphors, our points of comparison are limited and partial before the reality of God. It ties in with the fact that all human thought is conditioned by culture, so that by our very nature we are incapable of reaching absolute truth. God is, and there is ultimate truth. Our grasp of the truth is never final, only ever partial. Ecumenism requires the refusal to absolutize our relative perspectives. This should make us humble and willing to listen to different voices in theological debate across all differences of gender, race, and culture. To take these principles seriously and to act on them would give reality to the ecumenical vision, to an alternative way of living, an alternative way of being. And in turn, that would enable the Church to be a prophetic sign, an inspiration even, to the broader society. At a time when the world faces many terrible crises, we in the Church recognize just how relevant still our vision is, for it calls, indeed lures the Church to become a more authentic sign and more effective instrument for the unity of the whole human community and the well-being of the earth. At his papal inauguration 2 days ago, Pope Leo said, "In our time, we still see too much discord, too many wounds caused by hatred, violence, prejudice, the fear of difference, and an economic paradigm that exploits the earth's resources and marginalizes the poorest." And he affirmed unity as the means by which the Church can be a sign of peace in the world. And in a similar way, just over a week ago, addressing the World Council of Churches Executive Committee, the General Secretary, the Rev Dr Ray Williamson, spoke of the World Council's call to the churches to be together on a pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity. It is a call, he said, that urges us to address and witness to our faith and hope in Jesus Christ in really challenging times. In the context of our times, Christian witness is critical and essential. And he spoke of the World Council's peace initiatives, solidarity and witness amid conflicts and humanitarian crises in Ukraine and Russia, in Sudan, in Palestine and Israel, and many other places facing dire and diverse situations. In particular, that meeting of the Executive Committee of the World Council condemned the atrocities being perpetrated in Gaza, specifically the openly stated policy of ethnic cleansing, and it called for the churches not to be silent in the face of such appalling inhumanity. Across all our issues, Dr. Pillay said, we need to stand up, speak out, and act together in the context of injustice and global challenges. The Church is to be a prophetic sign. It is also a time in human history when the world faces a severe crisis of sustainability, the crisis of potentially devastating consequences of climate change. New ways of living with the planet, not of exploiting it, have to be found. But saving the planet from an impending catastrophe will require limits. It will not be achieved without moderation, and therefore it will require a new way of seeing humanity's relationship with the earth. For 50 years, the World Council has been addressing issues of sustainability, beginning at its Nairobi Assembly in 1975, right through to the recent one in Karlsruhe in 2022, at which it produced a document, The Living Planet, a Just and Sustainable Global Community. Similarly, church leaders have expressed deep concern for the environment. Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si is a superb example. The Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew has been another. Both have undergirded their environmental concerns with a theology that challenges us to look beyond ourselves, that draws us into a broader view of reality, so as to see the whole creation imbued with the presence of God, to see all creation as a sign of God, to have a Eucharistic disposition whereby we see the world as a sacrament of thanksgiving. This work exemplifies the Church being a prophetic voice, helping society to learn again what it means to live in harmony with the earth and with the Creator. And the more that voice can be spoken ecumenically, the more the Church can be an authentic sign of the alternative so urgently needed. Ecumenism draws the Church into being a kingdom church, embodying what a good life and a good society entails, living fully the awareness that we live in the presence of God, embodying our deepest convictions about God, love, encompassing the universe, modeling today something of what we believe life about God will be like forever. Ecumenism draws the Church into a transformed way of living. However, for such a transformation to be realized, the 1964 Vatican II decree on ecumenism recognized, and it said, there can be no ecumenism worthy of the name without a change of heart. For it is from newness of attitudes, from self-denial and unstinted love that yearnings for unity take their rise and grow towards maturity. William Temple was the Archbishop of Canterbury just for a couple of years in the 1940s. Unfortunately, he did not live to see the World Council of Churches established in 1948. But he was one of the most significant leaders who worked for the formation of the World Council. Therefore, he was very familiar with the frustrations that ecumenism can involve. The ecumenical challenge, as he saw it, was to lift people's vision, to see the broader picture. He used to say that he would know the ecumenical movement had arrived when a church leader chose to attend a meeting about the formation of the World Council rather than attend a meeting of his own church's finance committee. Another of Temple's observations came from the glasses he wore, bifocals, which were a new thing in the 1940s. The problem, he said, is that we spend too much time looking through the lower lens, that is, attending to all the everyday things, one damn thing after another, as he put it, and not enough time looking through the top lens to see the big picture. And for him, the big picture was the unity of the Church. Through the whole endeavour over the years, naturally the way we have seen the ecumenical vision has changed, broadened, and been clarified. But always it has been and is a vision of wholeness, of oneness, of something beyond the brokenness of the world and our misuse of its resources, of something beyond the factionalism within our churches and the divisions between them. So it is a vision that offers us a different way of seeing the church, not through the narrow lens of denominationalism and factionalism, but from a different perspective, from a more expansive viewpoint, the expansiveness of unity, of the oneness all Christians have in Christ. That's the vision, and it's still relevant for our times. Thank you.